Hello adventurers, and welcome back to my channel. Today we have a story time and it's gonna be a little strange. In fact, today we're gonna be talking about strange encounters. And over the span of the time that I've traveled, I haven't had any really terrifying ones other than two, which I've mentioned here on the channel before. But on this trip, this one trip, I've had several bizarre things happen, and I want to tell you about them so that you can be prepared in case they happen to you. Buckle up, grab some popcorn. This is going to be a little wild. Let's start off by saying strange may not fully explain what has happened along the way as I've been traveling. I traveled from Texas to Colorado to Wyoming to Montana to Idaho, back to Wyoming, back to Colorado, and along that path I have met some interesting people. Now, I've met some amazing people. Let's not pretend like everything out here is scary, because it's not. Let's not even pretend like everything is kind of problematic, because it's not. In fact, the vast majority of the people that I have met have been amazing and just so welcoming and kind, and I have had some of the best conversations of my entire travels on this particular trip with just random strangers that are out there doing the same thing that I'm doing, or that work at different places. And I find it so awesome to be able to just like have those conversations. This though is not about those. This is about those rare, like 0.0001% of the population who recreates, shall we say, differently? Let me explain. I camp in my van. Very clearly, very obviously. That means sometimes my campsite looks like the one that I'm about to show you. Beautiful, amazing, awesome. And other times it means it's a Walmart parking lot or a Cracker Barrel or something like that. That is the nice part of having a van. And so I can go to all of these absolutely amazing places. However, with that, sometimes that means that I'm camping in a very busy time. Sometimes that means I'm camping at a place that is very crowded. And sometimes that means you're a little bit closer to your neighbor than you would like to be, which is what happened in both of these scenarios, and it's why they turned a little bit weird. See, where I'm camping right now, there's some distance between me and my neighbors, but this is still kind of close for what it is compared to what it normally is. Normally, you can't really see your neighbors as much, and because of that, normally you're spread out a bit more. This is very unlike a parking lot. See, in a parking lot scenario, you're parked sometimes right next to your neighbors, and in doing so it's a little close for comfort, we'll say, a little bit odd, maybe even potentially, and a little bit strange whenever you can hear what's going on at your neighbor's campsite. So what exactly happened? I was parked at a Walmart, and I was really close to my neighbor, but I parked a certain way so that the wind wouldn't hit me. And at first I thought that my neighbor was upset because I had parked where I did, because they were a bigger rig. But then I thought, no, they have plenty of room, so I'm not sure what's going on, but I could hear them screaming outside of their rig, like screaming. And I was inside. I was in the back. I was already getting ready for bed, making my dinner, doing all the things, and I could just hear screaming, and it made me kind of nervous. And I was inside the van just going, oh no, what's going on? And I was talking to Riley, and I told her, I was like, I've never encountered anything quite like this. What do I do? And she was like, well, what do you mean screaming? And then she could hear through the voice chat the screaming, and she was just like, okay, that's different. She was like, is he upset because you're parked next to him? And I was like, I don't know, but I can't just move the van. I have to actually get out because how I had things set up. And so I was going to get out of this door right here and just really quickly move about to move the van, and I opened the door, and I think it alarmed the person who was screaming. And I was like, he just looked over, like, and in doing so, it put me kind of in a weird position. Let me explain. See, by me putting myself in the position of opening the door, I then initiated a conversation. I just didn't know that at that moment. But what was happening outside of my door was so loud and so kind of scary that I was like, I have to move. And the only way I can physically move, because I decided to stack things up because I didn't want to put them away, was to get out. And so when I opened the door, my natural reaction was, when this man I just looked and I said, "Are you okay? Dude, are you okay?" And he was just like, "Yes." And he kind of glared at me. And then he started on what I can only explain to be a Pete and repeat scenario. If you've never seen a Pete and repeat scenario, it's basically where a person starts on one subject and then they say something and then it somehow takes them back to that initial subject where they then repeat it, but then add one detail. And each time that they go around the cycle of doing this, it adds to the narrative. For example, I mentioned, I was like, I just wanted to make sure you were okay because you were parked here before me and I parked here, but there should be plenty of room, but if there's not, I can move. And he said to me, "You have the right to be here." I have the right to be here. We're in a public place. This is a Walmart. Walmart was founded in Arkansas. The owners of Walmart make X amount of money. I think you can see where this is going. It was just an ongoing, really strange narrative that was just like, okay. At the same time, he would get to a point and then say, "I'm sorry if I offended you," and then start over. And each time he would add just a little bit more to it. I was there for probably 10 minutes just sitting in my door going, I don't know what to do. And at the same time, because I don't know why he's doing this, I didn't know if it was because he had some kind of issues, or if he was fine, or if he was in the middle of a psychotic break. It could go a lot of ways with this kind of behavior. And so I was just there. And the longer that I was there, the more impending doom was going on, like as my heart was doing this. And I couldn't respond to Riley, who was very nervous because I was sitting there. All I was doing was just, as you can imagine, that was a little unnerving. I also had let my friends Charles and Tony know what was going on before I had gone, just in case something happened, because when you're in a scenario where someone is having a psychotic episode or potentially has some kind of mental breakdown or something like that, it could go badly. Not to mention if they weren't a person who was a good person and was out there screaming because they were doing some substances or something. It could go a lot of ways. At the point that I closed my door, I still wanted to move the van, but at that point I also felt as though if I moved the van, that was going to also be a problem. And that is a very uncomfortable scenario to be in, let me tell you. If you do something to protect yourself, you could also put yourself in harm's way. Like, that isn't a scenario we end up in very often. This was a very strange encounter. And at some point, after I closed the door, I was texting, and Riley was asking me very relevant questions. What does this guy look like? What is he driving? What is his license plate? Like, if something happens, I need to know so that we can get you help. And I was like, thank you. And so after everything kind of calmed down, I heard someone else outside, and I assumed that this was a person who was attached to this person, and I just kind of was like, okay. I peeked out my window and they went inside. And that was the all of me hearing from them for the night. I, at that point, snuck a picture of their rig to Riley, as well as Charles and Tony, since I'd been talking to them, and I hesitantly went to bed for the night, figuring that I'm in a Walmart parking lot. You know, we had a good interaction. It wasn't a bad interaction. It was scary, but it wasn't bad, but it was also scary. So that was my strange encounter at a Walmart. But that's not the only strange encounter I've had on this trip. My other strange encounter, I think you can see, it just starts making me real nervous to even talk about these, because these by far are the strangest encounters. Now, whenever I traveled previously, when I was tent camping, I had that one guy who like looked inside my rig and was trying to like figure out if there was anything of interest to him, and I just immediately left. And that was a scenario where I could leave, so ultimately I had relief. The other scenario that I've talked about previously, when I was on a hiking trail, I immediately found somebody who could help me, and I just made sure that in my mind I was going to be safe no matter what, and then again I left. But these are scenarios of where I am physically sleeping. And again, in this particular scenario, I didn't feel like I could leave because I felt like it would be almost as dangerous for me to have made action toward leaving as it would have been for me to stay. And that's a weird feeling, let me tell you. In the other scenario, it also dealt with where I am camping. And in this particular scenario, wow. So let me set the tone for you on this one. I pulled into a campsite that I really love. It's treed, it's beautiful, and I found a nice little place that's kind of tucked away. And then I heard someone yelling. As you can imagine, great, awesome, we're doing this again. But it seemed as though he was yelling as a talking loudly kind of yell, not like in a rah kind of yell. And so I was like, okay, everything should be fine. So I went to bed for the night, everything was cool. Until the next morning. The next morning, I had popped my doors open and I was going to relax. And in doing so, I was like, let me just get some emails off. I'm just going to have some airflow. And I could hear yelling again. Now, let me give you the best possible description of this scenario. There were two vehicles at this particular campsite. I knew one had left because I saw that one was gone. So I'm assuming this other person was just there by themselves and just at the campsite hanging out. Cool. We all do it. But then I heard them yelling more and more and like projecting their anger. And I was like, okay. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm set up in camp mode. Clearly, if I am going to leave, I'm still going to have to go outside to take down my stuff to go on the road because I'm in full-on camping mode. I started to get a little nervous about that. And as I got nervous about that, I again fired off a text message just for a little safety sake. I always encourage you to have a safety buddy that you can text no matter what. And this is the reason why. I was very nervous because of some of the things I was hearing this guy say, including that the homeless population is ruining his favorite campsite and that all of these little vans are out here for a bunch of people who are homeless. Now, I had looked around the campsite. I'm the only little van. And I also am one of the only people who's parked closer to this guy, even though I am parked well into another campsite. However, with that said, I completely understand when people come to a place and it's their happy place and then it's more busy. I currently am in Leadville, for example, and right now it is super busy here. And I know that it is much more trafficked than it normally is. And to a person who, if they're used to coming out here when it's not a busy time, I could totally get why they would be like, wow, there's too many people here. But I've also been to other places where people park so close that it's just absolutely obnoxious for no good reason, just because they're afraid to park by themselves. So I'm kind of just used to all scenarios. However, I get it if you're a weekend warrior and you're used to coming out and having your special time, it could make you a little tense. So I knew that he was projecting toward me, but at the same time, I kind of listened to his words. And his words were saying, these homeless bums come out here, they ruin everything, they trash it up. They're just a whole bunch of homeless people. And these were his words that he was screaming into the void of the forest. Now, as you can imagine, that was lovely. That was super lovely. I didn't know what to do from there, so I proceeded to then think with my full brain and go, ooh, I can solve this issue. I know what to do. He thinks we're all homeless people. I'm going to make sure he knows we're not homeless people. So I then proceeded to get out of my van, in my campsite, mind you, not in his, and I proceeded to go about this series of talking on my phone out loud through voice notes, basically detailing things that would indicate, hey, not only am I not homeless, but I choose this lifestyle. I have a home. I have a job. I have people who care about me. I have people who know where I am at this moment. They have a photo of my campsite and they have a photo of the surrounding areas. Now, how did I do this? I told Riley, hey, this is going to sound real crazy, but I'm about to send you a series of voice messages. Just go with it. And she was like, okay, give me details as you're going so that if something happens, I can write this down. So I proceeded to step out of the van and have this series of voicemail calls, so to speak, which basically were outlining work, because I didn't know what else to do, but I wanted him to know it was not okay to say those things. And then also that I am a good person and I am not whatever he thinks that he is projecting. There's nothing wrong with homelessness. I do understand his upset with some of the places getting closed as a result of encampments. There is a difference between an encampment and a person who is staying at a place for 14 days, however. And I think that to the outer world who does not understand van life, that might be a harder one to understand. So I wanted to make sure I laid it out real clear because I knew he was listening to everything that I said. So I did. I basically was just like, hey, I made it to the campsite. I'm going to be here for a couple of days. And then I'm going to get off to the next project because I have to meet you in Telluride. And then I just kept going. I just kept going for a few minutes, just giving those details. Yeah, I just sent you my pin for my location. I'm sending you the pictures of my campsite and also my neighbors so that I'll be safe. And I just made it known that I was making sure I was protected. And in doing so, I think that he kind of figured out that I'm probably not the problem that he thought I was. And again, I totally understand from a perspective of a person who comes out and recreates and then they see the lands closed. Because I myself have seen a lot of land closed. I get it. I totally get it. Places that I've gone to over the years, just kind of passing through, might stay a night, now gone completely because people have gone out there and been disrespectful, left their trash, rutted up the place whenever it's wet. You're not supposed to drive in those areas when it's super wet and mess up the roads, by the way. Just rule of thumb. I've seen all of that, so I get it. I totally get it. In fact, I just saw that outside of Vegas in Government Wash at the wonderful Lake Mead area, they just went in and put barriers up because too many people were taking advantage of it and overstaying. And when I was there a couple years ago, just staying for my 14-day limit, I noticed that there were numerous people who were living there. There was no way that they were not living there. Does that make sense? So again, I do believe that there is a problem and there is not really a good solution. So especially for people who lack the knowledge of the difference between different groups of people, they just projected everyone. And that was why. Now, unlike the first guy who was legitimately having some kind of nervous breakdown, this guy was projecting. And so both of these things can be very dangerous. If you're out and about and there's a person who is having a mental crisis and you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, it can be very bad. So you always have to be very careful. And also remember, and as weird as it is, be kind to people, because I really do think that the difference between him continuing with the outburst and him stopping the outburst was just that I put forth effort to be kind and say, "Are you okay?" I think that up until that point, that guy at the Walmart, he was just losing it. He needed to scream out into the void, and unfortunately the void was in a very populated area with lots of RVs. So it was really scary to probably everyone. I just happened to be the closest one part. But there is a difference between that and then projecting. And unfortunately in this world, we have a lot of people who project. And it's not just projecting about campers or nomads or homeless. It's people who project about anything that they have on their mind. And instead of projecting our insecurities or our feelings, we should just allow people to be in their bubble. And as long as it's not hurting somebody else, let's not dive into their business. I understand it is very, very difficult to see whenever you go to places, a place shut down as a result of people being bad. And so that's why I always advocate that we need to do our part to clean up after ourselves and things like that. But at the same time, us going out there and just screaming out into the void of the internet saying, "Oh, people trashed this place, it's gross," it doesn't do any good. It doesn't do any good. Instead, show yourself being proactive. Show yourself cleaning up. Instead of just saying people are nasty, what are you doing about it to fix it? Because you just complaining about it isn't fixing it. I'm sure that the second guy that I encountered, he was just tired. He was sick and tired. And I get it. I totally get it. But it's also important for people, again, even if you're sick and tired, to understand that not everybody is the boogeyman that you think that they are. Especially whenever they're just like a 40-year-old woman just running around the country showing people cool places. But he had no knowledge of who I was. So his projection just came from a place of whatever he had seen.
And I totally get that. At the same time, did it make it creepy? Yeah, it did. Did I feel very uncomfortable? Oh yeah, I did.
Now, normally I don't do these kind of story times. I don't tell you guys about these weird things because normally I don't encounter too many of them. Again, most people are lovely. Most people are so nice, and I don't know how many times that I pulled into a campsite and like either my neighbors have not cared that I even exist, or they have come up and been like, hi, how are you? Very polite, very nice. So in these two instances, I just wanted to share that, you know, you can have extremes. At the same time, are those normal? Not really. As long as you're putting yourself into a position where you're just kind of out of sight, out of mind, not bothering anybody, most people are not going to bother you. I will say this, after I had that little nice conversation with Riley via voice chat, guess what? The guy never said another thing. Because I think in his mind, he was just like, oh, okay, it's not just a bunch of bums pulling in here. It's not just a whole bunch of people. I even mentioned in this voice message that I was at a place for a specific thing. And so that would set his mind at ease that I wasn't there just to junk up the place. Now, the reason why I continue to go back to the junk up the place thing is because one of the things that he said when he was talking about homeless people,
his exact words were, all these people can't afford nice vehicles, so they move into these tiny things, and then they leave their trash everywhere. They leave their feces everywhere, except for he didn't say feces. He was very angry. And so I think that instead of being angry at somebody who projected, instead, I'm going to tell you guys this. If there are people like that guy out in the world, they are watching what you are doing. They are watching just so that they can complain and say, gotcha, told you so. And so if you're out there, instead of complaining about the trash, pick up the trash. Instead of talking about the places, make the places better. You know, we're all out here just trying to live our lives, do our things, enjoy the outdoors, and recreate in public spaces as well as private spaces. And in doing so, we have to remember that just because we do it the right way does not mean everybody does it the right way. And unfortunately, like everything, the ones that are doing it the wrong way are the ones that are seen the most. So if you're ever in one of these weird scenarios, be kind. Number one, be kind. Also, stand your ground, but in a way that is not going to put a threat of harm in your path. And if you can't, figure out the scenario, leave. These are always my tips to you guys. I think that it's very important for us to be good ambassadors for the outdoors. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm just a one person. What good am I doing? We all have the ability to do that. Here on my YouTube channel, I promote positivity in the outdoors, as well as leave no trace and other pieces of things that you can do. Every single person can do this.
So if we're doing all those things, the people who are projecting will have less to project about. And then if they're angry about something that doesn't involve us. I think also another thing that we can do is take pride in your rig. Make sure your rig looks nice. Even if you have a beat up jalopy, who cares? Take pride in the way that you portray your beat up jalopy. Take pride in the way that you keep your camp. Make sure that your camp doesn't look like it could be something that people could come out and be like, oh, that's an encampment. Because, yeah, I mean, if we give people a reason to be upset, they're going to be upset even if there's no real grounds to stand on. If you're a person who has a setup, make sure your setup looks put together and nice. Make sure that whenever you clean up in the afternoon every day, that you make sure nothing can blow out into other campsites. These are all things that we can do. And do we deserve to be yelled at as though we're bad people? No. But we also have to realize that unfortunately the world kind of works like this. And so they're always looking for a reason to say someone is a bad person or an irresponsible person or a person who is mooching. And I think that we can all agree that most of the people out here who are just recreating don't fall into any of those categories. For example, I've been told numerous times that because I do van life, I either must be a trust fund kid or I must be a person who just mooches off the government. Neither is true. I come from a regular family. I work really, really hard, and I don't receive any money from the government. That's for sure. And I think that the misconception is that all creators on YouTube are just e-beggars. And that's also not the case. I do believe there are probably some people out there who lean a little bit too much into asking for donations and things like that. But I think that there's also a way that you can provide content and things like that for people and not be just mooching off of others. I have several streams of income that I do, and I work really hard on each and every one of those. And I think that unfortunately the problem is, just because I'm in a van, some people, they just don't care. Some people are always going to project, again, their issues onto you. So if they look at you and say, oh, you're just a dirty hippie. Okay, cool. Instead of getting upset and being angry, I'm going to say, okay, and I'm going to let it slide right on off of me. You know why? Because I know better. I know who I am on the inside. I know that I work harder now as an independent creator than I ever did when I worked in the workforce. And that says a lot, because I had some really professional jobs that required a lot of hours. But I also know that I take a lot of pride in what I do and what I share. And through the educational content that I provide, that a lot of you guys get to go on some amazing adventures that you might not be able to go on otherwise. And if that means that somebody wants to yell at me and call me a dirty hippie or say that I'm homeless, okay, cool. I know at the end of the day I have a tiny home back in Texas I go to, and that this is a choice. And I know that not everyone has this as a choice. So I think that it is my responsibility as a person who has that privilege of being able to go back to a tiny home to help keep places available for people who might not have an option. And in doing so, though, also to say, hey guys, I understand life is really hard sometimes, but we also have to do the things. Don't overstay on public lands. I know it's hard. I know that gas costs money, and sometimes people are down and out, but never overstay on public lands. Because unfortunately, what is happening is people are like that guy who's projecting. They're seeing that. They're seeing that people are moving in. They're staying too long. They're seeing places that they like to recreate close. But more so, they're seeing a resource for people who do not have also wiped off. And so if we want to do nice things for ourselves, we have to do nice things for others. We have to realize that all together we exist in this same bubble, and we're using the same public spaces, which are our rightful places to go. So we need to make sure that we take care of them. Now, my strange encounters may never be your strange encounters, and I hope that they are not, but I hope also that this kind of gives you a glimpse into what can happen on the road, and also some insight as to why I believe that some of these things do happen sometimes. You know, we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. We're going to have some bumps, we're going to have some hiccups, but find the joy. Don't let people bring you down, and understand that sometimes it's not about you, it's about them. They're having a day, and they haven't figured out how to handle it in the same way that you have, by you finding that joy. Until next time, guys. Bye.